Columbia River commercial fishing?
Jeremy Wilson, I'm a policy analyst out of our Region 5 office, deal with fisheries and hatchery issues.
Jeff Levon, and with Coastal Trawlers.
Ryan Johnson, I'm the SAS Troll Representative, PFMC.
Guy Lutz, West Coast Troller.
Beth Dacey with WFW, my natural resource scientist with our Columbia River Division. I oversee our fishery sampling.
Shane Conley with WW and Columbia River Policy Analyst.
Ryan Lothrop, Columbia River Fishery Manager.
Thanks, everybody. I'll just go down the list online and you show up on my screen in alphabetical order by first name. I know a bunch of you are with the department. If you're with the department, please just tell us what you do. If you're not, then tell us who you're affiliated with while you're here. I'll start with Britton Ransford, who's with our Cape team. And I realized I have to ask you to unmute to speak.
Yeah, Britton Ransford, Region 5 Communications Specialist.
Thanks, Britton. Next, Bruce Hazen. And I get, for everyone online, I get an ask to unmute button. All they can do is press it, and then you have to do something on your end, I think, to actually unmute. There we go. You should be live, Bruce. And you might be having a mic problem because we can't hear you. So I'll jump on to Chad Jackson.
Chad Jackson, Region 2 North Central Washington Fish Program Manager.
Thanks, Chad.
North of River area.
Yeah, white salmon. Stevens.
Emily Rhodes. And not seeing you be able to come off mute.
I can jump in for that one. Emily's with the Ocean Sampling Program.
And Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Wayland with the Ocean Sampling Program.
Thanks, Erica. Quentin.
Quentin doesn't come on. He's with WFW, Columbia River Division, fishery biologist. He's under the weather, so might have a sore throat.
He came off mute and then he went back on. So hope you're feeling better, Quentin. Sam Bogart.
Hi, Kyle and everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Samantha Bogart. I'm the Public Records Coordinator for the Fish Program and IT Program. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Ty Wyatt.
Thank you. I'm fisherman out of Vancouver Island, angler advocate, saltwater captain in Alaska.
Thanks, Ty. Vince Squire. You should be off mute if you're there, Vince.
I'm here. Fisherman out of Westport, concerned citizen, advocate.
Thanks, Vince. Warren Hazen. You should be off mute if you're there, Warren. For some reason, Ryan Johnson's in the meeting too. I guess being here once just wasn't enough.
Well, there's Ryan Johnson. There's a Ryan Johnson.
You know, yeah.
All right, but thanks for that, everybody. Just good to know who all's in the room and who's all listening online. I don't have a structured agenda for today. We heard all the forecast. If there are questions people want to ask more about on any of those, and we have the right people here to answer them, we can. It's going to be frantic as we move from this week into getting to Sacramento next week. So I know people have already been thinking about season structures with what they've seen from the forecast. We had our co-manager meeting to kick things off on Wednesday. One of the things that came out of that meeting was I have a meeting with the coastal tribes scheduled for Monday afternoon. We've had kind of a timing problem in the past where the coastal tribes wanted to get to PFMC and have their meetings on quota levels before they wanted to talk to us. And I kind of said, we need to talk before we go to California so that we can get to work on our initial alternatives without you being able to say we haven't talked to you. So I've got that scheduled for Monday afternoon and can follow up with people on how that goes before we head down to California. Maybe I'll just see if Ryan has anything you want to kick off with before we go into questions and thoughts on seasons.
Yeah, so we, jumping back to the forecast, the only thing that's still outstanding is Snake River Wild forecast that is, basically done by TAC, so, in process. Assuming it's something reasonable compared to what we've seen last 2 years, which is no reason to suspect otherwise, it's expected to put us in the 15% harvest rate category for the upriver breaks. I think that's the update there, and then we have a couple sets of rec commercial advisory group meetings on March 12th following March Council, just to kind of kick us off inside the river. And then the big public meeting, there's one public meeting upriver, Northeast McNairy, March 17th in Kennewick. That focuses on the Upper Columbia, Hanford Reach, Snake Spring primarily. And then we have our big public meeting down in Ridgefield, April 2nd to cover basically relatively the lower river, downstream Highway 395.
And the Upper Columbia meeting, that's in person only, but will be recorded.
Partially true. Yes, in person only. We won't have a virtual option up there. Just the setting of the room doesn't work for us, but we will be recording our presentation ahead of that for posting online YouTube. And then going back down to the Ridgefield meeting, that one will be a hybrid option. Hopefully we can get some good attendance in person. And we will have this format same as last year, where after the main section, we break out into commercial rec. So it'll be just like last year's format.
Thanks, Ryan. So with that, again, if people have follow-up questions on forecast, or if you want to dive into talking about season ideas or process questions, I'll just open it up and we'll walk through things. Phil?
I wanted to just talk a little bit about Grace Harbor Chinook. It has been an issue in the Pacific Salmon Commission, U.S. section of the U.S. Pacific Salmon Commission here this winter. We have an overfishing threshold. There's a maximum fishing threshold, exploitation rate threshold that's in the council's FMP. I think there were 3 out of 5 years, if I remember right, that it exceeded that threshold, but the SCT was using a value to make that assessment that was higher than what they should have been doing. There was a lot of concern by the Quinaults that the procedures in the council's FMP for stocks that are deemed to be subject to overfishing wasn't followed. And I'm looking at this Chinook forecast for Grace Harbor at 13K. And I'm wondering if there's been, I think John Carey from NOAA Fisheries has been doing a little bit of a look at this to see whether or not this is triggering the overfishing level or not in 2026. And my understanding, at least from his evaluation, was that it did not trigger I think it's 0.63 of there, but I couldn't know. So I just flagging that as at least as a concern, wondering whether that, I mean, we'll be looking at that as we develop options. And do the evaluation of options. But I know they're gonna be looking hard at that. And I think there's speculation that it may fall into the overfishing category in 2027, given what we know about the returns for the previous 4 years, so. Just wanna, and I'm not sure what the status of the Chinook model is and when it will be ready to be up and running or not. And anticipating the Pacific Salmon Commission Chinook Technical Committee doing their work to come up with what the AIs are to the north to plug into our program model, but that we're not gonna get that for probably 3 weeks. So all that is to say, I just wanna, the sooner we get a look at that Grace Harbor situation and whether or not it's triggering overfishing, that would be informative.
That's very good to know, especially going into the meeting I just mentioned on Monday afternoon. So when you said John Kerry's looking at it for 2026, is he looking at the rate in an ALF run and whether it's exceeding? Or this is like the annual rate, not the multi-year geometric mean of abundance or escapement?
Right, it's the annual rate, making some assumptions about northern, I mean, I'm probably assuming that we're meeting our catch ceilings in SEAC and northern BC and WCBI. And assuming most of the impacts on that stock are north of the border. So it's not something we can do a lot about in rain, or certainly not in rainwater. But in particular, the salmon FMP, if you have a stock that's in that overfishing as opposed to overfished category, there's 4 steps that they need to take, and one of those is to ensure that council managed fisheries are not, can't remember the exact word, but contributing or exacerbating, doesn't exacerbate the fact to the stock being put in that overfishing category. I think it's on page 68, but so, but you're also supposed to, another step is to notify all the other pertinent management entities, which the tribes are saying is North Pacific Council, Pacific Salmon Commission, all the managers in Washington, Oregon, all that stuff. So, which is a letter that's supposed to come from the council executive director to those management entities. So. But I'm getting off into the weeds here, just wanted to highlight that. And we have spent a lot of time talking about what to do with that complaint of the Quinaults. And NOAA has been steadfast in saying the appropriate place for that conversation that takes place is at the Pacific Salmon Commission table. So not sure they readily accepted that.
No, thanks again. That's very helpful stepping into next week. And we've heard statements from Quinault at the council about that, but a lot's gone on that I hadn't heard about since then. So thanks for that. Like I said, we'll just pass it around. Comments, questions, ideas.
I mean, on that same note, Kyle, and I know you can't, somebody asked a question earlier about Canada and how their different fishing structures play into our conservation objectives, but I think they just announced they're going to mark selected fisheries starting March 1 for the rec fishery. And that'll potentially give some, I don't know if they know enough about it yet to model that, how that would affect when we get our numbers from Canada.
They don't. one of the things we're pushing Canada on is to develop a tool, a modeling tool, cram-like tool, so that they can evaluate a set of regulations, particularly in southern Georgia Strait and Wamapuka, as to what it means, because
Not
they-
just less.
yeah, because they've been over their calendar year exploitation rate on Snohomish for 3 out of the last 5 years, so. And we're trying to get them to do something about it. But it's almost like California has been managing their fisheries for years, is. You know, we'll dial in a couple of 3 days here and we think this is what's gonna happen, and then. What they think's gonna happen doesn't happen. They find out that their exploitation rate's way higher than. So,
Maybe not.
and the other issue, frankly, is that they're dialing in marked selective fisheries to take pressure off their natural stocks. And put more pressure on our hatchery stock, because they're the ones that they're catching in their marked selective fishing company stuff.
10% mark rate right around 40 million Chinook.
And there's the Chinook discussions happen in a different forum than the coho discussions, but yes, we've been hearing all the same stuff in the Southern Panel Group, trying to figure out what they're doing and what does it mean. And because we're using different modeling tools, at least for for coho fram, there's some crossover. It doesn't mean that Canada is invested in coho fram, and there's still difficulties with how we cram their information into our model. And Colin could probably talk for 2 hours on that, but all those discussions are ongoing. And I'm trying to monitor as people pop into this breakout and make sure I'm not shutting anybody out if you see me looking down. But again, let's just pass it around. Whatever you want to talk about. Gotta
My
be.
question is for Ryan, are we gonna fix buoy 10 this year? We're gonna have these split season, mark selective, non-mark selective? No?
That'll be April 2nd discussion for sure.
Yeah.
That being said, I think in river, you can expect herbs to be the limiter again. But we still have to manage the tule usage. So that still means some in-season stability measures, what we'd call it, and mark selective is one of the tools of many that we incorporate, including our Chinook handle curve. But I think we heard from, I don't want to speak for everyone we've gotten feedback from, but largely what we've heard back from last year has actually worked out fairly well in the grand of where we've been the last previous few years. So it's a step in the right direction. So we're continuing to keep our options open, but we will be squeezed a little more in herbs this year, which has some effect on that fishery for sure.
Well, it creates a scenario that the guides come up from buoy 10. And then they flood into the mouth of the Cowlitz and they create all kinds of havoc. You're out another 200, 300 boats maybe there. One old guy got his anchor cut there because he anchored in the wrong spot, I guess. But it creates some dangerous conditions. So that's just my concern is I'm all about a guy making a buck, but like we gotta do something to take it to again. Just that same fish is upriver 20 miles and it can be caught. So Portland or at mouth of the Cowlitz. So it's you know, that's I'm just concerned. I don't know what we're gonna do on the second.
One thing that we make sure we are aware of is the potential effort shift with regulation changes in season. And so that is something that we do try to line up, help with enforcement as well. Doesn't address everything, but that's why in that section, we don't fish mid-late September in that section because of the amount of tules that will be caught right there, which will put us in a bad spot.
Right.
So it's kind of, yeah, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place on that.
Well, I noticed in your report to the commission, your review, your 5-year review, that you had the guidance as a potential problem, maybe limiting licenses and want to find out what the department was on that.
I think that goes without saying that it involves Oregon and there's different jurisdiction over that program, but yes, that is a policy guidance on the front.
That's right.
Steve?
On a positive note, we observed firsthand this past summer that we just had an incredible biomass of both coho and chinook that seemed to, park right off the mouth of the Columbia River, and we had the month of July. We observed red hot fishing like we haven't seen in 20 years, where you're fully limited in 1 hour and headed for port, back home, by 9 a.m. or earlier. Incredible fishing. And then unfortunately, we had to close her down early because of that. And then the Columbia River, the buoy 10 fishery lit up like we've never seen that light up. And the fishing continued to be really good all the way into September. So it was just an incredible year of fish, and just so exciting to be a part of it. Incredible.
Thanks, Steve.
Ryan, on that same note, did you see a significant increase in coho directed fishery in September during the Lower River? It seemed like it.
Buoy 10 was good, very good.
But I mean, after the Chinook closure.
Yeah, no, buoy 10 stayed pretty red hot for quite a while. Best we've seen in years, honestly, which was great. And then we only allowed coho retention when Chinook was open upriver, except October onwards. And I'm thinking it fished pretty well in the lower river as well. Yeah. Yeah. So it stayed pretty solid.
Just wondered if you saw effort that was substantially higher than you'd seen in previous years, but it seemed like it to us.
I think the trick on that is we had to manage herbs, so that limited when you could go fishing up there. So that kind of kept effort tamped down a little bit, because it was either open to Chinook and coho in September, or it was close the salmon and angling just to manage the handle of Chinook. So in past years, we've been open more in September. This year, we kind of caught our fish pretty quick, and we didn't get much for extensions. So when you look at total effort, definitely not as high as it probably could have been if Chinook allowed more access. That seems about right.
Somebody else has to have something on the mind.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For whoever wants to take it. Butch or Kyle. Whoever. So
I actually have a couple of questions if you guys can hear me okay.
We can't. I should have said, if you're online and you have a question, if you can find the raise hand button, I'm watching that and I'll call on you.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll put you on the list next. Or go ahead now, Ty.
Oh yeah. Thank you guys. Hey, I'm kind of new to this North Falcon process, but I did have some questions about there's really three main trends that Larry can probably confirm. I don't want to throw him under the bus here, but it seems to be that with loss of opportunity, when there is opportunity, we're seeing exactly as one of the other gentlemen talked about, people rush to where the opportunity is. Like we're seeing at Drano, we see the mouth of Cowlitz, Buoy 10, and it's not, it's not within borders. We're talking about in Canada, we're talking in Oregon and Washington. These are the same people in these fisheries. But the other part of this trend that I keep seeing is the continued not addressing predation and not addressing, for Chinook specifically, harvest to the north of us. And now that's all coming to a head. At least Canada is figuring it out, and Alaska continues down the same road. I'm just curious of the thoughts moving forward, if that's going to come to more of the forefront versus, what I see as an angler advocate is anglers keep getting blamed and taking the conservation burden on with no change, right? So that's kind of my poised question to the department looking forward in the next 10 years in this process. If they adapt and change, I mean, you see what's happened in California, right? And they have a whole different slew of issues and problems, but it's more of a rhetorical question. So I don't know what people's thoughts on that are.
So Thanks, Ty. I don't know if you listened to the main session this morning. There was a question about predation. No, we don't have the right people here to talk about everything that's happening, but there's a lot going on. To look at the issue, to figure out what we can do, what needs to be done on the predation issue, and the answers are going to be different for different parts of the state. The harvest to the north, I mentioned in the other room that there have been these big renegotiations of pieces of the Pacific Salmon Treaty. The Chinook chapter is the big one. It's starting up again, but 10 and 20 years ago, we went through a process where we got reductions to northern fisheries. I could kick it to Phil. He's got a longer, more knowledgeable history than me on this, but yes, we are actively working to do what we can do to get a better balance of where the harvest on some of our stocks that are getting hit more heavily in Canadian and Alaskan fisheries are, but go ahead.
Well, the Southeast Alaska sport and commercial fishery had the smallest catch there in over 20 years, and that they've had in over 20 years. It was the smallest catch ceiling or quota, if you want to call it that they've had in decades. The northern British Columbia, northern BC fishery has been taking less than their catch ceiling that is specified in the treaty. Consistently for the 7 out of the, we're currently in a 10-year regime, 10-year agreement. This is the 7th year. They haven't reached their catch ceiling or their quota in northern BC fisheries yet. West coast of Vancouver Island, same situation. They've been catching between 75 and 90% of their quota. But what has happened, if you look at the catches in Canada, is that they've shifted their fishery to the inside, into Georgia Strait in particular. And so we've seen those catches go up as their coastal fishery catches go down. And that's the way that they've been able to meet their calendar year exploitation rate ceilings that are specified in the treaty for various stocks is that while they increase particularly their sport fishery in southern Georgia Strait, they've compensated by not taking what they could in their marine water, in their ocean fisheries. So we are just starting the renegotiation process of all 8 chapters in the Salmon Treaty, Chinook being one of them. The commissioners are doing the most of the work for the Chinook chapter. Things like for Coho, the Southern Panel, which Kyle is on and Butch is on, are doing the primary negotiations for our Coho. But there's been substantial reductions in the northern fisheries over the 2009-2015 base period as a result of the current agreement that we have.
Thanks, Phil.
Ty, just one more point. You're kind of the first thing you brought up was this sort of shifting in effort as we reduce opportunities. And it sounded like maybe you were thinking on a broader scale, but I do want you to know that the modeling teams are thinking a lot about that, right? We've had reductions in opportunities across the last 10 or 20 years, and we are seeing sort of increased effort per day. As a consequence of that, we're thinking a lot about how to account for that to try to do a better job of predicting how long we can have a season.
Thanks, Colin. And that's been really evident in Puget Sound, where we've had some areas that have had months-long seasons that are now down to 3 days and maybe open again. And then we're trying to make the multiple areas open the same days to try to spread that effort out so everybody doesn't descend on one area for an opening. So again, if people online have questions, please just put your hand up in Zoom and I'll keep an eye on and call on you. But did you have something, Phil?
Yeah, I just wanted to get we're in the crystal ball mode here because we're early in the process and you can ask questions and get conjectures, which is what I'm gonna do. I don't know whether I'll get a response or not, but just looking at the forecast for Sacramento, being up from 160 up to almost 400,000 And say, I mean, Klamath is up pretty significantly too, from 82 up to 176. We've had 2 or 3 years here, maybe more, but 2 or 3 years certainly, where we've had some pretty restricted fisheries to the south. Unfortunately for them, but we have benefited by that. I mean, we have, regardless of whether we used to think our fish didn't go south of Falcon on the Chinook side, we know that in fact they do. I mean, I'm looking at that and I'm surmising that the likelihood of more salmon fishing to the south of Falcon will be a reality in 2026 by some amount. And so we are probably going to see some increases in impacts on stocks that we depend on in the north in order to promulgate the kinds of seasons that we want. So my question is, when you look at those numbers, see those increases, are the same kinds of thoughts going around in your head?
They are in mine. And the one stock that I worry about, because it's one that's at a not great abundance, and it's one that new Fram base period's been a problem, is Upper Columbia Summers. They get hit in those south of Falcon fisheries, and we've spent a lot of time untangling. Is the way Oregon's modeling their fisheries, over predicting what the impact, just trying to make sure we're doing a good assessment, and we haven't really had to worry about that as much as south of Falcon fisheries have been not completely closed, but close to it. So that's one that pops. Thule's there'll be a squeeze from there, and probably some cocoa squeezes too. So yes, I've thought about it a lot, but not down into what's it going to mean, how big is their fishery going to be, what does it mean for our fisheries? And I don't know, Kyle, you spent much more detailed thought on it than I, but if you have.
You know, I definitely agree with the point that you raise, and we're definitely thinking about it. There's certainly an expectation that with those forecasts that there could be some increases there, and the impacts that Kyle's getting into on the Chinook side. It's a little bit more difficult to predict exactly what that means at this point. There's no operating model or anything to really kind of try to project that. So it's a pretty big unknown. There were certain stocks, certain Columbia River stocks. There was some room last year, whereas you would expect the ocean exploitation to be at a certain point. It wasn't necessarily at that at the end of the last preseason process. So some of those, as some of those fisheries increase south of Falcon, potentially those allocations just get back to more of a norm there. That sharing that's been down in recent years because of their limited fisheries. On the coho side, doing some exploratory modeling, and I have a lot better sense, although they have a lot of different levers that they can pull for their fisheries, and we're predominantly talking about south of Falcon Chinook fisheries. But on the coho side, I think we can get a better sense. We have a working model. I can take some guesses at what their fishery structures could look like, and at least as we go into the council process, have a more solid foundation for what that looks like. But I would say it's certainly on our mind. In some aspects, we have some idea what to expect, maybe. So we're not surprised. And on the other hand, especially on the Chinook side, there's some pretty big unknowns, and it might be the first model run. Talking south of Falcon, which pretty much everyone in the room and online is probably not, specifically what's going on down there, but something to keep an eye on during the council process. There are some south of Falcon, some allocation discussions with some stocks. The Southern Oregon, Northern California coast coho stock. There's going to be some conversations about that. That could be a limiting factor in planning fisheries. Exactly where that's going to come into play, whether it's Oregon or more limited to California, I don't really have a sense for that. So hope that helps a bit.
Going back to your about the Canadians moving basically marine fisheries into the inside. Are they now fishing different stocks, their stocks, and not taking Columbia River stocks, so to say? I mean, is it a different fish that they're catching, or just because they're going inside?
I'm sure the stock composition's different. Certainly not hitting Columbia stocks anywhere near as much as they do on the outside. But I think my conjecture is that, they had some significant problems with their stocks that originate on the west coast of Vancouver Island that they're trying to address by reducing their fisheries there. And when they do that, they go below, so they're coming out below this catch, what I call catch ceiling, which is another word for a quota that they have that's established by the Salmon Commission. And so I think they've seen an opportunity to where they could increase some fisheries on the inside, particularly by going to mark selected fisheries. And shifting the stock composition on the stocks that they don't have as big a concerns on. In addition to shifting their fisheries onto catching fish that originate in Washington hatcheries. And so, but by doing so, the problem that they're exacerbating is their exploitation rates on stocks like Nooksack and Snohomish and Stillaguamish and those stocks. So we're watching those. We have a metric in the Salmon Commission we call a calendar year exploitation rate. And so, and there are limits for each one of those stocks on that the Canadians can take on a calendar year exploitation rate basis. And it's measured against the 2009-2015 base. So they haven't been over their CYR rates for those stocks except for Snohomish. And we've really been hammering on them to take some additional reductions, particularly on those inside fisheries, which is where those increased impacts are going to come from. So, and then I think the other thing that they're doing up there is they're really being fairly aggressive on area closures for southern resident killer whales. And they have areas that are closed specifically for that on their side of the straits. So I think we're still trying to figure out what kind of an impact that will have. Will that in fact reduce some of their exploitation on some of our Puget Sound Chinook stocks of concern?
Kind of a good news, bad news.
Yeah.
More or less. I was just gonna throw in too on what you were just talking about with Sacramento. I fished July in Oregon. And I had one trip that they sampled, and out of 7 fish, 6 of them were Columbia River fish. That was the end of July opening. I had 1 Central Valley out of that. Spring fishery down in Oregon fished April there. Same thing. I had 2 trips sampled, 7 fish, 6 of them were Columbia River, 1 was Central Valley. And I fished in fall time in September down there, and it was just the other way around. 6 Central Valley, 1 Rogue River. There was no Columbia River fish in there. And out of 21 fish, no Klamath River fish at all, which I was pretty happy about. So.
Interesting.
Larry?
So I mean, it's probably a conversation to have with Oregon, although I can be careful here just because, but if they've only harvested 50% of their Chinook recreationally in the last, I don't know how many years, it's been several in a row, maybe, although, we know the nature of our ocean Chinook fisheries, so that be careful, we don't harvest all of ours either. But I'm just wondering if there's a conversation there to have about being more realistic about what our catch is in Oregon. So that we're not, when we go into the preseason modeling process, we can have as large of an impact potential constrained sites in Washington. And then I heard, I was on a call a couple days ago with some of the California folks, and there's a real expectation that some coho will likely be a limiting factor for some of their Chinook opportunity as well. So, and obviously the closer you get to Southern Oregon, California, that will play a bigger role. So it's going to be interesting to watch and see how that all plays out.
Yeah, that's something we can look at and think about. North of Falcon Fisheries, we're managing the quotas. they're not, so understanding how what they're putting in models translates to actual catch or releases and seasons, it can be tricky, but
Well, if it's 50% off, if it's 100% off.
They're probably going to quotas this year. Jimmy and Johnny and I talked yesterday for probably an hour. They were asking questions on how we come up with our port sharing and stuff. So they're really looking hard at that and think they're gonna get forced to it this year. They are.
interesting.
So, yeah, we had a long conversation yesterday about it.
Do you think Oregon is as well?
I didn't talk to Mike, but those Jimmy and Johnny reached out to me yesterday and we talked quite a bit about it. They think they're gonna get forced to do it this year.
CDFW had this process on Wednesday, and their staff straight up just said, we are gonna be using quota systems this year.
I could see the look of disappointment on Butch's face when Phil said we talked about the Coho chapter in the Southern Panel Room, but we also talked about the Chum chapter, right? But
Yep. I'm not prepared to give that right now, so I thought I'd talk about some other things, but next time we're in this room, I'll give you a 5-page document on Chum. California's a mess right now. You know, you would think they would be a little relieved that they have some opportunity. You got, a person in Facebook that writes a pretty nice, cheerleading kind, look, guys, we have opportunity to fish, and then you have another sports leader just come and, be all over it. The guys want 15% guaranteed in the river. There's a bunch of letters in the briefing book that don't want quotas. Had good contact with a person who is in charge of making sure they have quotas. They're not gonna let them, nymphs particularly want to let them fish time and area like they do, just go fishing and count later. Haven't been able to count fish. And so there's some, the main high line trollers down there are really having some heartburn with the potential quota, whether they win or not, or whether they just say, screw it, we don't want to fish, and sport guys get to split them up. But California definitely is going to have a better accounting system, whatever it is, to the fisheries. And plus the SOCO is going to come in as a driver for sure. So I did plead with John North to South of Falcon hasn't got their quota for the last few years to maybe come in with more of a realistic quota. Down there, they let the fishermen set the quota, and then they kind of work down from there, rather than they tell them what is the sideboards. So it's a little different process down there. I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just saying that's the process. And I asked John to maybe have a little reality on that, so we're not begging them and pleading them to come down as we're chopping our arms off, and they come down and we get the chop, maybe like 1 or 2 arms. So anyway, it's not pretty down there. You would think, oh, we got some fish, we'll get to go fishing, and it's almost the opposite. So they just fundamentally do not believe that, somebody that's not as good fisherman as a highliner should be able to catch the same amount of fish, and equalize it over the people that normally do well. They just can't fundamentally get that. But they must have been doing good on their other fisheries, and they're not that hungry yet, because I remember we went through the same thing with our trollers. By the time it was done, it wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but they accepted it. They just are absolutely have a fundamental fit down there over that potential. So it should be fun. Watch the snowball throwing contest in the council. And then the SAS should be, God bless Ryan. Anyway, I don't think it's gonna be wide open down there at all.
Thanks, Butch.
Yeah.
Ty, online, you had your hand up, but you put it down. I didn't know if you still had something.
No, it's probably more rhetorical. I'm probably little out of my lane here, but isn't California completely non-selective fisheries in the ocean? So it's it's kind of like going back 30, 40 years when where Oregon and Washington were in management regime, really. I mean, I'm probably kicking the hornet's nest here, but I mean, we
Thanks, Todd. Anybody else? Probably saw another hand, maybe not.
I'll ask another question, kind of something on my mind all the time. Non-select coho. Last year it seemed like it was off the table, and I don't get a deal with the tribes. What I understand is they were the ones that basically put their foot down and put a stop to it for us, the troll fleet. How does that work, and is there no wiggle room? And also, on the other hand, they are always keep everything coho. It just seems like, you know, you've got one group can't keep them, the other group keeps them. And I've never got to ask a tribal guy how they justify this and how you could work together to save the most fish.
So it's not that non-selective coho is off the table, it's that it would be a really tough process for us to, based on outcomes from several years back, to plan a season as mark selective, and then during the season say, we want to switch this to non-selective.
If we're under a quota though, what difference does it make?
Because with the quota, there are mortalities accounted for on unmarked fish that they don't show up in the quota, but as part of having this 1,000 fish quota, we're gonna have this many unmarked encounters that translates to this many mortalities. The tribal concern is if we're in a situation where the mark rate's way different than what we thought, and we try to go to non-selective, that will wind up impacting more natural fish than what was associated with that quota. And it's some really complicated math to figure out how halfway through a season, we're gonna shift gears and go non-selective and make sure we don't increase our impact on those wild stocks with that transition. And it's kind of been on the wanna figure it out work plan for a while, but it's not something that's easy to figure out. Going into a season, non-selective is a different thing, and we can certainly look at that, but I think most years what it will mean is a lot less landed catch for rec fisheries, shorter season, for troll fisheries, less landed catch. I know Chinook and coho are different importance to the sport and troll fisheries, but it's not that it's off the table, it's that for now, switching in the middle of the season is essentially off the table.
Well, we did it the year before, or the year before that, I don't remember. And I was just wondering why it was. And, you know, we had so few coho to catch last year that a lot of us were just shaking coho till sometime in August when we really started.
You remember we traded some shit up to you guys for coho.
Yeah, but we're still catching them, but we're just shaking them. And we all know that shaking them, sometimes they don't make it so good. And trying to be nice about it. I'm just trying to figure out a way that we could get through this to where it benefits everybody. We put more fish in the pockets of the people that want them and need them, and we save more fish. And it just seems like every year we go through this and we all know really what's happening, but we can't really come up with the right solution. Hopefully somehow, some way we could, I guess is what I'm saying.
If you find the magic solution, don't hide it.
I'll work on embedding it, yeah. Can I just ask, so why the tribes, keep them all the time? There's no question. I mean, it's just part of is that just written in stone? That's just the way it ever is gonna be?
Honestly, there are cultural differences. They have a different feeling about releasing fish that they know they're not all gonna survive. There are places where tribes are looking at mark selective fisheries. I mean, gillnet fishing is probably not the best technique for releasing fish, but there are tribes in the Nooksack Basin, for example, with that extremely depressed Chinook population. They're using some mark selective fisheries to try to harvest some CNS spring Chinook. So it's not written in stone, but it's going to vary by tribe and by the situation. And generally, the tribes do not want to fish mark selective.
I was just mostly thinking of the macaws at their troll fishery. I don't know exactly when they start keeping them, if it's July 1st or whatnot, but they're keeping them a little itty bitty thing, and it just. Yet, you know, we're fishing and shaking them, and it just seems like. Why are we doing it this way? That's all.
I'll jump in and just add that, you know, these are conversations, whether to be non-selective or selective, you know, each preseason process we go through, and we have those discussions. And you know, from now until the end of mid-April to the end of the council meeting and getting that final approval, all that goes into that, the intensity and all everything that it takes to get agreement. And so, you know, what we're talking about is we are planning these fisheries to be mark selective, and then you kind of get into the season. You could think about, you know, we've had all these agreements in place, this understanding, this plan, and it does present some challenges in order to very quickly identify that you want to make that change to the fishery, and then kind of present all those data that are up to you know the day of a lot of times, and then get everybody to sign off again on that change. And we do have, you know, some limited tools in season. I mean, we have some decent tools, but they're limited. You know, there's a lot of unknowns with, you know, we don't, in the ocean fisheries, we don't have, especially on the coho side, what I've seen trying to dig into that and draw relationships, your catch rates on the water do not equate well to the actual abundance that's out there. You know, you would think that those would be tied together. I will tell you that everything I've seen, they are not. So it's really hard to tell you, you know, hey, guy, you're bringing a lot of coho in. Does that mean that the coho are just fighting, or does that mean that there are more out there? And I can't answer that question. And so it's really difficult as a manager to have enough knowledge to convince others, you know, to have the confidence to present that, and then to get all of the sign off that we typically get during this ginormous preseason process to try to get that in season and present that to for federal approval to get it in place. So that's kind of on the managerial side, that's kind of the process there.
Is it true that we have to have a retention of coho right out of the gate in July, or could we go till August before we have a retention for coho?
Yeah, we could. You know, it's not, you need to account for those release mortalities. And so as long as we're doing that in the model, making sure that all that mortality is accounted for, that is something that we would have to.
That is possible.
You know, that's come up before, we've thought through it, and, you know, for whatever reason in previous years, we've kind of decided to stay with the standard schedule, but that's absolutely something that we'll talk about it this year, I'm sure, to some extent. So, and that is a possibility in my view.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Looking around to see if anybody felt.
Some of us are, you know, meeting with our groups and trying to get ready for next week. And, you know, we're looking at the forecast the same as you are. We know kind of which ones are our workhorse, you know, stocks that we depend on, the OPI hatchery component. Obviously is one for coho, and it looks to me very almost the same as it's down a touch, but just looking at the hatchery component of it, and there's a different mix of early and lates, but it's pretty close to where we were last year. Probably on the Chinook side, the biggest change that I see is on the BPH being down from where it was last year in the preseason. So do you have any, I'm not asking you for numbers, but just in thinking about where we ended up last year with our overall Chinook and Go quotas, do you have any just general guidance, thoughts? Should we be looking at things that are relatively close to where we were last year, maybe a little up, maybe a little down? Or do you see some big red flag for some stock that at least I'm not seeing that you think we need to be thinking about too?
I don't see any big red flag. I'm always paranoid when I don't. But generally, I think coho, we're in a little better place than last year, and Chinook, we're in a little worse place than last year. So what that translates to numbers, I won't guess yet, but that's how I'm looking at it. And you have other thoughts?
I would just agree with that. If I didn't agree, I would have thoughts, but I agree with your read on that.
Butch?
sort of switch gears a little bit, guess we all read Facebook now and,
No, we don't.
it's on our screw. Your wife does. But, you know, there's this, department bashing that's been going on, and there's, you know, some real dramatic cuts that have bad things to what we do, like the monitoring program. We can't keep our tribal obligations up. We can't count fish. We're not like California. We don't fish. And, you know, to think it's funny and tee and all that stuff, that's great when you're sitting at the dock, not fishing. And I would strongly suggest that, if you have any, of your legislators that you can call, yesterday was the time to do it, and keep calling until they hear you. Spent 6 hours on the phone with Chapman and others. And I just never got the funniness that how people thought they would have more opportunity with less money. I just never got that. Maybe I went to the wrong school. But that there's a lot of other things in there that are bad, don't get me wrong, but that monitoring thing is, you know, at 1.5 million cut in the Senate side and 700,000 on the other side, that is a huge to that program. Huge. And I would strongly encourage that, if you, have the ability to call or know anybody, it's the department bashing should stop for a while and support should begin, or we'll all sit on the dock together and, you know, give each other a high five how we bash the department. It doesn't work. It's never worked. I think there's not one person out there that would rather see us fish, you know, all year long. And I've never felt that in my life, no matter who was up there. And so it's time to help them, help ourselves, and make some calls to get some funding back in. I guess the main message is, if we sit on the beach, it has the opposite effect of what they're trying to do with budgets, because we don't have sales tax revenue, we don't have B&O tax, we don't have license sales, we don't have landing tax. All that stuff they're trying to improve by cutting the monitoring program just exacerbates the whole issue and makes it worse. So anyway, sorry to take up the meeting for a political thing, but I feel strongly about that. People that I see on there that are doing the bash, and I don't understand, because they're definitely dependent on fishing and coastal communities and whatnot. It's kind of irritating. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks for that, Butch. It also reminded me of a point I meant to make up near the front. In addition to budget stuff we had to deal with last year and don't know what we're dealing with this year, over the past couple of years, the department's really cranked up our safety and training requirements, especially for our field staff. So there's a whole nother level of complexity for Kyle to get all of his samplers on board, have the trainings they have to have to be out in the field. So as we get into details of season dates and things, he's going to be thinking about, how do I bring these people on at the right time and get them into the trainings they have to have before they can be out on the dock sampling. So just keep that in mind too. It's a great thing. We've got to keep our staff safe, but it does make it more difficult for us to get career seasonal or temporary staff into positions and out in the field working. My safety tip for you is, if you want lunch, don't go to the China Main buffet. Anything else? I don't see any hands online and don't see any in the room. Greg?
So since we're on a political thing, there are two bills in the House and Senate. One is Ed Orcutt, the other one is Jeff Wilson. It's a bill to donate money when you register your vehicle, or your vessel, to donate to sea lion predation. The department has had some slashing of the budget, that they don't have the money to take care of the problems. And so those two guys introduced two bills on the House side, on the Senate side. If you want, donate some money. If you don't have to. So I just let everybody know that it's out there.
Thanks, Greg. Nobody has anything else. Thanks to those of you that tuned in online, and thanks for those who made the effort to be up here and be in the big room and over here with us. And we'll see some of you next week in California, and I'm sure see others of you throughout the next month and a half of fun. Thank everybody.
Thank you.